chop the wood to light the fire. Fa la la la, fa la la la. 'Tisn't much that I require. Is I'm gonna start for me? Come on. You can do it. I did it. Happy, happy, happy. Yeah. Do, 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 do. Let me go here. All right, yeah. Well, um, obviously yesterday we started fucking the second chapter. We finally got past it. And so that was pretty fucking good. I liked yesterday. I liked I'm really liking this book so far. It's taking it in directions that Latour has explored before, but in kind of different ways. The use of political ecology. There's a lot of similarities between this and other things, but he's not really treading. He is treading over old ground a little bit, but in a different way, and so it makes it a lot better. For instance, with this, I'm going to like make a video on matters of fact and matters of concern, because this the first chapter actually explains matters of fact and matters of concern like really well. And the first part is kind of just going to be of that video, which is probably, it's only going to be like 3 minutes, that part, 3 or 4 minutes, maybe even less. It'll probably end up being less. But because he explains it so well, I wanted to start out with a definition. And then the reason why it'll take a little bit is simply because I have to do research into stuff, because I want to give like an example of go through an example and explain it and use clips and stuff. And I thought that would be really cool. So we only have 8 pages, so it'll probably be a little bit of a shorter stream unless I decide to continue, but I probably won't. I'm fine just going a section at a time. Is it not 62? Okay, it is. Okay, yeah, it's just shorter. But just sorry, it's just on the bottom. But yeah, and so there's that. It's this book has been really good so far. I'm not sure I know how to quite put it into words. I need to get better at doing that. I should, I need to start doing. I need to start writing stuff down. I'm not writing stuff down, but like after I read, I should start just writing on what was talked about in some way. Like even if it's like short, even just like a sentence or two. That'd probably be pretty good. That'd probably be a really good idea. Just so I get in the habit of formulating it in words. Zotero. I've heard of that. I've heard of Zotero. Zotero. I've actually heard of it before. I might do that. I'll look into that after the stream, since I'll have a little bit. But now we should start. First division, learning to be circumspect with spokespersons. For anyone who's read Science in Action, and I think also We Have Never Been Modern, the idea of spokespeople is really important. Um, Non-humans can't speak, but we can. Um, uh, 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 one of the contradictions in sorry, I should start by explaining this. One of the contradictions in the nature society divide is somehow, despite primary qualities being almost inaccessible to us, like the facts about objects being like almost inaccessible to us. Obviously, they aren't. Scientists, it is said, can access them somehow. They can get past secondary qualities to these primary qualities about the things themselves in some way. And that's where Latour's ideas of spokespeople is. Objects can't speak, but they are spoken for. Sorry, non-humans. It's more appropriate to say non-humans instead of objects. Non-humans can't speak, but they can be spoken for, and there isn't necessarily a. The problem for Latour isn't with the spokespeople, it's with the idea that there's this great divide, when clearly there isn't. People do speak for non-humans, and they can speak for them quite well. In the previous thing, it was what's it called? Um, uh, Sorry, water. I'll be able to find it and just read it. Sorry, lawn. It's just such lawn. Oh, it was in the what's it called? Christopher Stone argues that I can judge with more certainty and meaningfulness whether my lawn needs water than the Attorney General can judge whether and when the United States needs to take an appeal from an adverse judgment by the lower court. Um, the consequence of the divide is that it seems like we can't access the world because we are separated from it. But nevertheless, we do access the world. We talk about accessing the world around us. Um, and for Latour, we can obviously access. I'm just gonna say the world. This is what I'm just gonna say. We can do this, and for him, there is no great divide in that way. Of course, we can. It's not a thing. So that's not really a thing in that way. And that's where he gets his ideas of spokespeople, scientists, and like not just scientists, but mostly he's going to be talking about scientists in his earlier stuff, or technologists is what I'm going to call them. People who work in like studying technologies and stuff like that. He's going to talk about those because his main focus early on is, of course, in science studies, and from that, also in technology studies. He, the famous work of his, Aramis, is, no, 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 yeah, of course, when Latour I actually wonder if Latour has ever. Hmm, there's kind of a bit of a difficulty in some of the things being said, because I forget if Latour ever talks about animals themselves when referring to non-humans. When referring to non-humans, he mostly is referring to things we would call objects, but he obviously doesn't just mean objects. But because he works in science studies and his focuses were science and technology studies, and his focuses were normally in stuff like biology, I actually wonder if he gets into that in Pandora's Hope. He might actually get into more animal stuff in Pandora's Hope. But in the book I'm referencing, in Science and Action, um, he's focusing on stuff like X-rays and N-rays. He's focusing on things that are like very much um like that there's no doubt that these things, like when we say they can't speak, it's like you can't really you can't really deny that. It's like one of those things. But there's actually a chance. You know what? You know, it would be interesting. Reading Donna Haraway. Um, is Donna Haraway an actual ant person? I always forget. Does she do ant? I always forget. Because Donna Haraway is actually someone who did work on surrounding animals and stuff specifically. So I actually wonder. Sorry, I'm looking for this real quick. Actor. Okay. Donna Haraway. Actor network theory. Let's just look up Donna Haraway and actor network theory. It's not a primary originator of actor network theory, but her work, particularly her concept of the cyborg, is related to the broader discourse of new materialism. Yeah, she's okay. That makes sense that she is actually part of the a more broader movement. Before it was a more broader movement. But yeah, Donna Haraway, Latour uses Haraway quite a bit. I believe he was actually friends with her, if I remember correctly. I think he was also friends with Stengers, Isabel Stengers, which is another person who's like extremely important to this, like to the field itself, to like what Latour is doing. And so it'd be very interesting. I need to read her stuff as well, Haraway's and Stengers. They both seem really good, really amazing. Um, he's going to use Stengers, I believe, quite a bit in this. Um, and in his other stuff, he uses Haraway quite a bit. Um, very important. Very important. You'll see throughout the books, you'll end up, no, if you read any of Latour's books, you'll end up seeing people like the same people constantly mentioned. It's very small. It's a very small thing, kind of what they're doing, and so you see a lot of the same faces, or well, the same names. I do not, but I have to. What's it called? But I will read it. I need to just I forgot to just pop out chat because I haven't fucked with it right now, and so I just have to look at the activity feed on Stream Elements. Can't stick around too long because I still haven't finished the first chapter, but take my money. And it was thank you for the $4.2. $4.20. Really appreciate that. But yeah, this will probably be really quick. This will probably be really quick. I should be able to finish before you have to go on. Before you go on. Um, they shouldn't take longer than an hour. We've been kind of speeding through it a little bit because this might go a little bit slower than an hour, but it's only like 8 pages, and so yeah, and so yeah, I'll probably get some stuff done. First division. Learning to be circumspect with spokespersons. Oh, right. That's right. The reason why I stopped reading was because I was explaining some Latour stuff. See you later. Since the composition of the common world, now that it is no longer a given from the outset, has to be the object of a debate, the only way to recognize the citizenry within the collective that may be relevant for public life is to define the collective as an assembly of beings capable of speaking. Political philosophy traditionally required discussion to take the place of violence. Now it also has to be able to replace both silence and the non-discussable. Okay. We might, sorry. Why might this vague word discussion, borrowed from the fracas of human assembly, serve to redefine political ecology, which bears precisely on beings that do not speak, that belong to the nature of things? Political philosophy, the reason why it, the reason why now it has to take both the place of silence and the non-discussable. I wasn't sure about this at first. I thought it might have been this, but to explain to anyone, it's because most of the things that science talk about don't even make any noise or stuff like that. The scientists talk about don't even really make any noise. Some of it is just lines on graphs. A lot of it is. And also, they belong to the bracketed off nature of things, nature of butte things, as he says here. And so this is it. And so now we have to, now political philosophy has to deal with this now because of what Latour's doing, the steps he's making. And so that's the one thing. That's the next thing. And so discussion has to deal with this. And then we'll go to 261. Oh, we're on... Oh, no, we aren't. We still are in 261. This is the innovation decisive for me of Serre's natural contract. We shall try to tease out all its effects. What language do the things of the world speak that we might reach an understanding with them contractually? But after all, the old social contract, too, was unspoken and unwritten. No one has ever read the original, or even a copy. To be sure, we don't know the world's language, or rather, we know only the various animistic, religious, or mathematical versions of it. When physics was invented, philosophers went around saying that nature was hidden under the code of algebra's numbers and letters. That word code came from law. In fact, the earth speaks to us in terms of forces, bonds, and interactions. And that's enough to make a contract. Fuck, Serre's is so good. I love. Serre's too, even if I ended up, like, completely disagreeing with him, I couldn't... He writes beautifully, too. Malfeasance, appropriation from pollution, is, like, such a beautiful text, like just the way it's written, and I love it simply for that almost. Politics talks and palavers. Palavers. I don't know what that means. Palavers. Never heard that word.
Palaver.
Palaver. Yeah, palavers. Talk unproductively and at length. Unnecessarily elaborate or complex production. Oh. Okay, I understand what he's saying. Nature does not, except in ancient myths, fables, and fairy tales. Yet, a slight displacement of our attention suffices to show that non-humans too are implicated in a great number of speech impedimenta. And then we have a glossary citation and another footnote, which is now on 262. For recent descriptions of this work of making things in the laboratory speak, or rather write and trace, see Jones and Gallison, 1998, Latour and Weibel, 2002. I might have to go suddenly. There is a chance I've been having some health issues, and I've been like vomiting. I don't really know why. And before stream it almost happened. And so if I randomly just stop talking, I'll probably say something before I go. But that's why. If I say like give me a second, that's why. So if that happens, sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt the reading like that. But obviously do not want to vomit all over my desk. Who could have thought? Speech impedimenta designates not speech itself, but the difficulties one has in speaking, the devices one needs for the articulation of the common world, to avoid taking logocentric words, logos, consultation, spokesperson, as facile expressions of meanings that would not need any particular mediation to manifest themselves transparently. Okay, so he's saying that like there's a difficulty in trying to talk about things. It's really funny that I had trouble, that I was like fucking struggling to pronounce that stuff as I did that. So that's good. That's fine. This observation will allow us to modify the meaning of the word discussion, shifting away from the political tradition toward what will become the future ecological tradition, even as the word retains for speech, for the logos, the central place it has always held in political philosophy. Pippa, are you here? Are you here, Pippa? Take that as a no. You are! Does, sorry. I know we talked a little bit, and logos refers to a speech. Does it refer to something more specific than that, like a specific kind of speech? Forget if you told me. I forget if you told me. Okay. Okay. That that adds a little bit to it then. Okay, that makes sense. It kind of goes well with his attributing it also to discussion as a thing then. Because when he's talking about discussion, he's talking about a a particular account of something. Partly. Um, so, okay. The first speech impediment is manifested by the multiplication of controversies. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I got that. Glad I got that right. The first speech impediment is manifested by the multiplication of controversies. The end of nature is also the end of a certain type of scientific certainty about nature. As has often been noted, every ecological crisis opens up a controversy among experts, and these controversies generally preclude the establishment of a common front of indubitable matters of fact that politicians could subsequently use in support of their decisions. And then we have 12. Let's see. 262. The distinction between primary and secondary qualities quite clearly quite clearly required that controversies among scientists not be visible. How can we go about stabilizing them today? If scientists cannot reach agreement among themselves with the common background, the furnishing of the world, one can oppose the genetic makeup to culture, but only as long as there is only one definition of gene, not if there exist several of them. For controversies over genes, see Lewantin 2000 and Kupiec and Sanigo 2000. I remember this. Sorry, I was gonna make a point. Oh wait, let me go back and reread real quick. I was gonna make a point and then I completely forgot what I read. Oh, uh, in part of this, he is talking about um, sort of the nature of society divide. I think for him is part of the Great Divide, and that's how I take it at least. I might be wrong about that, but the nature society divide can only really happen, as he says, if we ignore the disagreements among scientists themselves about like stuff like genes, about like literally anything, like choose a topic in science, and like obviously there's going to be um for the most part some disagreement, and so yeah, but like obviously it's it's like when people say that like um you know, everyone knows what sex is, everyone knows what male and female is, when obviously there is great discussion over these things, and like counts as what, like what does this mean? um it isn't as certain as people like to make it out. A sorry, I should rephrase that. There isn't as much certainty in the scientific community about topics as people often like to make it out. In the face of this familiar situation, which can be found in the argument over global warming, as well as in the role of Amazonian earthworms, the disappearance of batrachians and the contaminated blood skin, two attitudes are possible. We can wait for the sciences to come up with additional proofs that will put an end to the uncertainties, or we can consider uncertainty as the inevitable ingredient of crises in the environment and in public health. And that's one of the things. Uncertainty isn't, it's not wrong to be uncertain or to talk about uncertainties even. Like, of course, things are going to be like, he's not making that point right now, but I just want to say it. Um, the fact that science hasn't figured it all out isn't an issue. Um, Only a particular rendering of science like says that like it has even figured it all out in that way. When it hasn't, it hasn't. Pierre Lescum's 1994 and Marie Angel Hermidi have assessed the problems created for national governments by the experts' disagreement. See also the fine example in Sheila Jasanoff. Also, I'm going to look at the batrachians. I think batrachians are earthworms. No. Huh, I didn't know this. Batrachia or batrachians um are tailless amphibians. I didn't know that. They're like frogs and toads. The second attitude has the advantage of replacing something that is not open to discussion with something that can be debated and binding together the two notions of objective science and controversy. The more realities there are, the more arguments there are. Matters of concern have replaced matters of fact. Here too, we cannot renew political ecology. Oh, sorry, I'm going to say this again. I always say this. If people have any questions, you can just ask. You don't have to worry about stopping. I will stop and I will explain. We have plenty of time. This is going to be a short section anyway. And so it's fine. I have plenty of time. I just wanted to say that. Here too, we cannot renew political ecology without benefiting from the contribution of science studies. The irruption of scientific controversies on the public stage does not prove that we have moved from established facts to baseless fictions. The distinction between what is internal to scientific disciplines and what is external has to some extent disappeared. Today, as before, arguments take place among researchers inside laboratories. And then he's going to reference lab life, probably. No, he isn't. He actually isn't. I thought he was. By failing to study the innumerable discussion forums of researchers, the tradition stemming from the cave separated demonstration from rhetoric. Two regimes of speech that Barbara Consent calls abodexius and epidexius, demonstration and persuasion. We owe the recent weakening of the distance between these two forms of construction of the world to laboratory studies on the one hand and studies of scientific rhetoric on the other. See several fine examples in Deere, 1991, Kappa, 1996, and Rosenthal, 2000. Francois Bastide's work, unfortunately interrupted too soon, also strikes me very fruitfully. Oh, did he die? Did he die? Did dead? No, wait. I'm actually. Hold on. I'm gonna check the. I'm gonna check the note. I mean, I'm gonna check the what's it called? Let's be confused with Ray Cat. I don't know what this is. I just want. Bastide. Uh, Francois. and then not on Saturno. Sorry, I can't read French. He did. Okay, I shouldn't say he. I actually get a woman whenever I look this up, and so that makes me assume that this might be actually that because the E at the end, it might actually be a woman's name. I can't see chat right now, so Wag might be yelling at me. Wag is. Okay, okay, he. It is he's a guy. Unless they trans their gender, but I'm not seeing anything about transing of the gender, and so I'm going to assume there was no transing of the gender, and continue. 63. Were we still in 63? Okay, yes, we were. Let us note right away that the meaning of the words discussion and argument is modified as soon as we evoke scientists and lab coats. It is surely no longer possible to oppose the scientific world of indubitable facts to the political world of endless discussion. There are more and more common arenas in which discussion is nourished with by controversies among researchers and by squabbling assemblies. 15. And we have another footnote. I assume this one's going to be footnote heavy. This is what Michel Coulon and Ari Rip called hybrid forms. Coulon and Rip in 1991. For a more developed argument, see also Coulon and Lascames et al. 2001. Scientists argue among themselves about things that they cause to speak, and they add their own debates to those of the politicians. If this addition has rarely been visible, it is because it has taken place, still takes place, elsewhere, inside the laboratory, behind closed doors, before the researchers intervene as experts in the public debate by reading in one voice the unanimous text of a revolution on the state of the art. There are then, within the sciences themselves, certain procedures that suspend, distinguish, and resume the course of the discussion, procedures that allocate the stages of the discussion to separate houses. It would thus be wrong to see people who do not discuss because they demonstrate scientists as opposed to people who discuss without ever being able to reach agreement on the basis of a definitive demonstration. Politicians. Sorry. There are then within the sciences themselves certain procedures that suspend, distinguish, and resume the course of discussion that allocate the stages of discussion to separate houses. Oh, okay. I understand now. It would thus be wrong to see people who do not discuss because they demonstrate scientists when they as opposed to people who discuss without ever being able to reach agreement on the basis of a definitive demonstration, because scientists also discuss, they also do this, but they do it in they have a separate, they have procedures of their own. Okay, so they're not that different on that front, at least. Where are we going to find the means of buttressing provisionally this capacity of speech that is intermediary between I am speaking and the facts are speaking, between the art of persuasion and the art of demonstration, or localizing it definitely in chapter 3 and 4 within the future constitution? In politics, there is a very useful term for designating the whole gamut of intermediaries between someone who speaks and someone else who speaks in that person's place, between doubt and uncertainty. Spokesperson. If I speak in the name of another, I am not speaking in my own name. Conversely, if I were to affirm without further ado that another is speaking through me, I would be demonstrating great naivete, a naivete that certain epistemological myths manifest. Facts speak for themselves, but political tradition prohibits. To describe intermediary states, we can use the notions of translation, betrayal, falsification, invention, synthesis, or transposition. To describe intermediary states, we can use the notion of translation. Oh, I know this. In short, with the notion of spokesperson, we are designating not the transparency of the speech in question, but the entire gamut, coming from complete doubt. I may be a spokesperson, but I'm speaking in my own name, another name of those I represent. Total confidence. When I speak, it is really those I represent who speak through my mouth. Yeah, okay. I think that makes sense. I think that's pretty straightforward. We have to acknowledge that the notion of spokesperson lends itself admirably to the definition of the work done by scientists in lab coats. It took a really powerful prejudice to make the laboratory and the assembly so incommensurable for us that we had to deprive ourselves of such a useful term. Lab coats are the spokespersons of the non-humans, and as is the case with all spokespersons, we have to entertain serious but not definitive doubts about their capacity to speak in the name of those they represent. The violence of scientific controversies as wide a gamut of positions as the violence of political assemblies. It goes from the charge of treason, it's not the objective fact that is speaking, but you in your own subjectivity, to recognition of the utmost infidelity. What you are saying about the facts is what they would say themselves if only they could speak. Moreover, they do speak. If they speak, it's precisely thanks to you. Sorry, I said infidelity. It's the utmost fidelity, I should say. It is precisely thanks to you, who are speaking not in your own name, but in theirs. That paragraph takes on a very different meaning if I didn't correct myself. Thanks to the notion of spokesperson, a process of assembling can now begin, and that no longer divides up the types of representatives in advance according to whether they demonstrate things are or declare what humans want. In the single Kyoto Forum, each of the interested parties can, at a minimum, be to consider the other as a spokesperson, without finding it relevant to decide whether the other represents humans, landscapes, chemical industry, lobbies, South Sea plankton, Indonesian forests, the United States economy, non-governmental organizations, or elected governments. Discussion, key term of political philosophy that has been mistakenly understood as a well-formed notion, available off the shelf as it were, has now been quite profoundly modified. Speech is no longer strictly human property, or at least humans are no longer sole masters. 62, and we're on footnote 16. I shall now, in chapter 4, show in chapter 4 how we can profit the tremendous work of Jürgen Habermas, 1990, Habermas 1996, on the transcendental conditions of communication. At this stage, however, Habermas's work seems counterproductive. We have to subject it, as we would Kantian morality, to too much twisting in order to apply it to non-humans, whom he seeks precisely to keep at a distance. By succeeding in separating human communications from instrumental reasoning still more profoundly, this is the aim of his philosophy. One would succeed only in moving the two assemblies even further apart, and giving still more power to the first, that of reason, to render the second, that of humans, mute. Haberman's enterprise is a strange one, in that it aims to silence those whom he aspires to see speaking more freely. 65. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how I freaking scrolled up that far. Where's 69? Okay. One of the simplest ways to describe ecological. Sorry. I'm just going to read the last sentence. Speech is no longer strictly human property, or at least humans are no longer its sole masters. One of the simplest ways to describe ecological crises is to acknowledge that they most arise from a process of inscription by the sciences. I explained it wrong. Sorry, guys. Non-humans non-humans can talk for Latour, but he doesn't mean talk like what I'm doing now. For that, we need spokespeople to speak in their place, but that doesn't mean they do not speak to us in any sense. What they do, and what he's probably going to describe, is they talk to us through things like graphs are the devices we use to measure things. This is how they talk to us. This is what he's saying, and there are ways to figure out whether or not someone is truly like is speaking for them. Is like whether they're being faithful to them, whether they're representing them well. There is ways to do this for them. But yeah, that was actually a really big fuck up on my end because it actually changes things. Me not clarifying that made nature mute again, which Latour doesn't want to do, and I should have been more careful with how I said things. That would have been that was bad. That was just bad. I wasn't being careful. One of the simplest ways to describe ecological crises is to acknowledge they most often arise from a process of inscription by the sciences, a process in which the only disciplines capable of alerting us to the problems put them into words, sentences, and graphs. To acknowledge as well that these same sciences no longer suffice to reassure us about the solutions. No one can continue to find respite from the violence of assemblies by entering the austere precincts of laboratories. Readers who may still be doubtful need only glance at a newspaper in magazines where there are traces of the profound change everywhere. Far from suspending discussion over matters of fact, every piece of scientific news, on the contrary, throws oil the fire of public passions. And then 262 for footnote 17. Marie-Angèle Hermite's book, Hermite 1996, The Contaminated Blood Scandal in France, shows magnificently all that needs to be changed in the conception of expertise and responsibility as soon as it is no longer possible to hypothesize that the knowledge brings controversies to an end. Same is true of mad cow disease, an excellent example, and of course, of the continual provided to the experts' theories of the long controversy over climate change. Those who wait for absolute certainty before acting are living in the wrong time. This is the main lesson of the precautionary principle. 65. I think we are still on. And it fucking scrolled me all the way up to 64 again. Why does it do that? Brr, anger. I'm upset. Some people still expect to see the day come soon, when we have become so knowledgeable that we shall return to the gentle past of mute nature, and experts speaking of indisputable facts and putting an end, through their knowledge, to all political discussion. Human beings live on hope. For me, this regime of speech corresponds to the modernist nightmare to which people sought to plunge public life, in which political ecology can finally aggregate. From now on, we discuss together before we decide. And back to the footnotes for footnote 18. In Chapter 4, we shall return to the new meaning that has been given to the term decision. I shall link to the key notion of institution. By using the word controversy in a positive sense, I have suppressed not the certainties of the sciences, one of the old barriers set up between the visible assembly of humans discussing and arguing among themselves and the scientific assembly that did of course discuss and argue a good deal, but in secret, that in the end produced only indubitable matters of fact. Let me actually get up the... Sorry, I have to get up side chat every time I freaking want to do anything. The other thing on my thing, because I don't have it. I need to do it in a better way. Okay, and back to 263. 19. Strange. The list of indictments taken up by Beck maintains intact the tradition's capacities for speech without remarking that for a very long time now, humans have ceased to be the only ones endowed with the use of speech. I don't understand this, but I assume if I read this, it would make sense. We're not doing that. I might do it later. Write something about it. 66. Nothing is resolved, however, by this first liberation of speech, because immediately people will object, in spite of everything the proof workers who conduct experiments in laboratories, record their inscriptions with instruments, who publish findings in journals, who argue over the implications and professional meanings, who summarize conclusions and reports, who incorporate the resulting laws in other instruments, other rules, other teaching, other habits, are all humans. Humans alone are the ones who speak, discuss, and argue. How can there be any doubt about this self-evident fact? And yet, let us not rush to agree. Where political ecology is concerned, nothing can be achieved in a hurry. As I have often pointed out, for good sense is almost as unreliable as a counselor as anger. Yeah, he's just saying, they kind of put it in like one sentence. He's just saying that obviously, like, me just saying this, that these things speak for themselves, isn't resolved because a person will just go, but that even though you say this, it is only humans who speak, and humans alone, they are the ones writing, they are the ones teaching, they're the ones creating rules, instruments, all these things. And so clearly only human speaks. This is self-evident, obvious, it's trivial. And that's kind of what he's saying. That's just what he's saying. We can go much further in the redistribution of roles between politicians and scientists if we agree to take seriously the little suffixes, loges, and graphes that all scientific disciplines, hard or soft, rich or poor, famous or obscure, hot or cold, have added to their enterprises. Each discipline can define itself as a complex mechanism for giving worlds the capacity to write or to speak. It's a general way of making mute entities literate. It is odd then that political philosophy, so obsessed with its own logocentrism, did not see that the greatest share of the logos was to be found in laboratories. Let us remember that non-humans are not in themselves objects, and still less are they matters of fact. They first appear as matters of concern, new entities that provoke perplexity and thus speech in those who gather around them, discuss them, and argue. Such is the form in which, in the previous chapter, we recognized external reality. Once it had been liberated from the obligation imposed on objects to silence humans. Who speaks? Actually, in laboratories through instruments, thanks to equipment that has been set up. Who speaks? Actually, in laboratories through instruments, thanks to the equipment that has been set up, the heart of the scientific assembly. Sorry to reread that, I realized I was going to read it wrong. Surely not the scientist herself. You want to heap scorn upon an acknowledged fact, you will say precisely that it is she, the scientist, who is speaking on her own, that it is her own speech, her prejudices, her thirst for power, her ideologies, her prescribed ideas, and not what? Not the actual thing, quite obviously, not the thing itself, not reality. The most common of all cliches in the city of capital S science is that facts speak for themselves. But what does it mean for a fact to speak for itself? The lab coats are not so deranged as to believe that particles, fossils, economies, or black holes speak on their own, without intermediaries, without any investigation, without instruments. In short, without a fabulously complex and extremely fragile speech prosthesis. If no one is crazy enough to declare that the facts speak for themselves, no one says either the lab coats speak on their own about mute things. Sorry, I lost my place. Found it. Or, when someone does make this accusation, it is in the merciless criticism of an utterance which then loses all claim to fidelity. It becomes no longer objective but subjective, no longer a fact but an artifact. We shall say then that lab coats have invented speech prostheses that allow non-humans to participate in the discussions of humans. But humans become perplexed at the participation of new entities in collective life. Formula is long, to be sure. It is clumsy and turgid. We find ourselves in a situation where a speech impediment is preferable to an analytic clarity that would slice off mute things from speaking humans in a single stroke. Better to have marbles in one's mouth when speaking about scientists than to slip absent-mindedly from mute things to the indisputable world of the expert, without understanding the first thing about the metamorphosis that would then look like vulgar sleight of hand. Whereas the myth of the cave obliged us to undergo a miraculous conversion, what is at stake here is only a simple translation, thanks to which things become the laboratory by means of instruments relevant to what we say about them. And then we have footnote 20. Here, would be useful to be able to show the role of circulating references that establish bridges between words and things. Hacking 1983. Numerous examples can be found in the remarkable work by Peter Gallison, 1987, and then a detailed story by Corinne Noor-Settina, 1989, and Hans-Jörg Reinberger, 1997. See also the accessible and detailed example in the Tor 1999b. Last section of this chapter, the key notion of articulation. I actually want to see what the Tor 1999b is. Tor. Oh my god, Latour comes up so much in his own notes. But to be fair, I'm pretty sure that'd be the case with a lot of authors. So, I can't really blame. Okay, it is Pandora's Soap. I thought it was, but I wasn't sure if I remember correctly. 66 still? No, we actually are on 67. So I'm trying to find... Oh, 20. Instead of an absolute distinction imposed by capital S science between epistemological questions and social representations, we find in the sciences, on the contrary, a highly intense fusion of two forms of speech that were previously foreign to one another. Let me close this. Before my readers begin to get the disquieting impression that they are being pulled into a fable, where animals, viruses, stars, and magic wands are going to start chattering away like magpies or princesses, let me emphasize that we are in no way dealing with a novelty that would be shocking to common sense. On the contrary, it is good sense that uses the epistemological myth of a nature that imposes itself as its own accord. It is good sense that speaks of striking self-evidence and gripping facts. To give political ecology a new foundation, We don't have to choose within a reasonable theory that presupposes a mute nature in speaking humans on the one hand, and a far-fetched theory that turns lab coats into the speech prosthesis of non-humans on the other. We find ourselves faced with an old wives' tale that presupposes in the same breath mute things in speaking facts, things that speak on their own, and indisputable experts. And I am proposing very reasonably to make this mythic contradiction comprehensible by restoring all the difficulties that a human encounters in speaking to humans about non-humans with their participation. In other words, while the new myth may already exist, the conceptual institution that would make it fruitful does not yet exist. This institution is what we have to invent. Like all modernist myths, the aberrant opposition between mute nature and speaking facts was aimed at making the speech of scientists indisputable. Thus, the speech passed through a mysterious operation distinguished resembling ventriloquism, from "I speak" to "the facts speak for themselves" to "all you have to do is shut up." What can we say? We can say what we like about the allegory of the cave. We can associate it neither with reason nor with simplicity. There can be nothing more archaic, more magical, even if the myth of the cave also serves as the primal scene for the monstrous marriage of the epistemology police, political philosophy, blessed by sociology. I do not claim that things speak on their own, since no beings, not even humans, speak on their own, but always through something or someone else. I have not required human subject to say the right of speech of which they are so justly proud with galaxies, neurons, cells, viruses, plants, and glaciers. I've only called attention to a phenomenon that precedes the distribution of forms of speech, which is called a constitution. I simply recalled what ought to be taken as self-evident from now on. In the speaking subject of the political tradition and the mute things of the epistemological tradition, there always was a third term, indisputable speech. Previous invisible form of political and scientific life made it possible sometimes to transform mute things into speaking facts, and sometimes to make speaking subjects mute by requiring them to bow down before non-discussable matters of fact. As I said in the introduction, we don't have a choice between engaging in political ecology and not engaging in it. By refusing to engage in it, we'd be accepting the strangest of all possible distributions. The speaking subject could see himself silenced at any moment by a more authoritarian speech that would never appear as such, so it remained indisputable and no one could cut it off. By defending the rights of the human subject to speak and to be the sole speaker, it does not establish democracy, it makes it increasingly more impractical every day. And then we go to footnote 21. The whole problem of Habermas's work lies here. What he says about humans would make an excellent definition of non-humans. As soon as we conceive intentional social relations as communicatively mediated in the sense proposed, we are no longer dealing with disembodied, omniscient beings who exist beyond the empirical realm, are capable of context-free actions, so to speak. Rather, we are concerned with finite, embodied actors, socialized in concrete forms of life, situated in historical time and space, and caught up in networks of communicative action. Habermas, 96. This is exactly what becomes of things that have been freed from the anthropomorphism of the object. Habermas, for believing that human beings had to be liberated, forgot those beings that made them human, non-humans, the great losers in his moral philosophy. Then back to 67, I think. No, we're actually in 68. We're in 69? We are on 69, sorry. Conversely, everything becomes clear if one agrees to situate the Republic before the distribution of forms, genres, and speaking times. If one allows the unfolding of the whole gamut of speech impedimenta that preclude over hasty pronouncements about who is speaking and what authority, and with what authority. I am not replacing the old metaphysics of objects and subjects by a richer vision of the universe, in which humans and things would speak as poets. I am only keeping open once again the problem of the assertion of the right to speak, a right that is necessary to the new assembly of humans and non-humans. One can refuse to raise the question of who is speaking, then one should not expect a collective to come together democratically. Democracy can only be conceived if it can freely traverse the now dismantled border between science and politics, in order to add a series of new voices to the discussion, voices that have been inaudible up to now, although their clamor pretended to override all debate, voices of non-humans. Limit the discussion to humans, their interests, their subjectivity, and their rights will appear as strange a few years from now as having denied the right to vote of slaves, poor people, or women. To use the notion of discussion while limiting it to humans alone, without noticing that there are millions of subtle mechanisms capable of adding new voices to the chorus, would be to allow prejudice to deprive us of the formidable power of the sciences. Half of public life is found in laboratories. That is where we have to look for it. Forgetting laboratories had only disadvantages. Political discussion was deprived of the multiplicity of voices that can make themselves heard and thus modify the future composition of the collective. The lab coats were obliged to become experts that intervene with authority, forgetting their own perplexity, their skills, and their instruments to intervene and short-circuit the debate time after time with indisputable facts and laws cast in bronze. 263. And this is footnote 20. Sorry, this is footnote 22. Wait. Did I miss a footnote? Oh, sorry. No, we are on 22. Sorry. I'm silly. I thought we were on 23. There is now a vast literature on scientific instruments and the various forms of visualization and argumentation they allow. The accumulation of these studies has completely subverted the old monologue of representation speaking about the world across the gulf of reference. This gulf has now largely been filled in, and no one today will take as an example of a scientific utterance, "The cat is on the mat." An utterance whose truth value would depend on whether or not the said cat is present on the said mat. Some starting points can be found in Lynch and Woolgar 1990 and Jones and Galison 1998. As with many of the themes in the previous chapter, specialists in my field often run up with the following alternative. Either we can keep on offering the same introductions to modify the image that readers have of scientific practice, or we can take this literature for granted and tackle the truly interesting problems that arise in a multitude of fields as soon as we have modified the theory of science that's paralyzing us previously. On the one hand, then, humans were deprived of the immense reservoir of democracy constituted by non-humans. On the other, the lab coats were deprived of the opportunity to contend, rather roughly and as equals, with the great reservoir of speech impedimenta, that is, democracy constituted by humans. Sorry, we cannot allow ourselves to merge to controversy with discussion and then simply add non-humans to the debate. The notion of spokesperson, they're going much further. They're extending doubt about the fidelity of the representation to non-humans. Speech is not a self-evident phenomenon that properly belongs to humans and that could be offered only metaphorically to non-humans. The speech of all spokespersons, those of the old science and those of the old politics, becomes an enigma, a gamut of positions running from the most complete doubt, called artifact or treason, subjectivity or betrayal, total confidence, which is called accuracy or faithfulness, objectivity or unity. Thus, I have not politicized nature. The representation of human spokespersons remains as profound an enigma as that of laboratories. That a human should speak in the name of several others is as great a mystery as the one in which a human speaks in such a way that he is no longer speaking at all. Instead, the facts are speaking for themselves through him. Someone who says, "I am the state," or "France has decided," is no easier to decipher than someone who knows what the Earth's mass is, or can quote Avogadro's number in an article. At this stage in our learning process, I do not claim to have the solution to the problem of the spokesperson. I seek to simply emphasize once again that there are two problems. That there are not two problems. One on the side of scientific representation, the other on the side of political representation. But a single problem. How can we go about getting those in whose name we speak to speak for themselves? Refusing to collaborate, political philosophy and the philosophy of the sciences had deprived us an opportunity to understand this question. Political ecology is determining clearly for the first time the problem that we are going to have to solve. It belongs neither to politics, nor to epistemology, nor to a blend of the two. It's situated elsewhere, at 3 removes. And that is the end of this section. Does anyone have any questions, any comments, any concerns about this? I'll give you guys a few minutes. If you have a question and you think it's going to be too long, just say yes, and I'll wait. And just start yapping. But yeah, while I'm waiting to see if anyone has any questions, any comments, any concerns, anything, I have something to say. In about 3 hours, I will post it in the server once I am finished streaming. What the time I'm pretty sure will be. In about 3 hours, though a little less than that, I will be going live with Sirius to once again cover Factish Gods. Once that happens, I'll post it in the announcements page. But until then, I will simply, like I do with my streams, post the time so you guys know, so you guys are aware, so you guys, can prepare if you have anything, and I'll Discord timestamp it and all that fun stuff. We went pretty good. We went for 72 minutes again. Last stream was around 72 minutes as well. So if anyone has any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. I'll give you guys like 2 or 3 minutes to type it out. Otherwise, if you do not have any questions, if you can, and if you would like to, it'd be very much appreciated if you would donate. Obviously not a requirement. I would be doing this anyway. But I appreciate it. I appreciate any money. I'm not the wealthiest, is I guess what I'll say. So any donations are greatly appreciated. I'll even just like little stuff, even just like a few bucks. If I could make this my full-time job, I would. I totally would. I would much rather have this as my full-time thing than what I do currently. I would much rather. I like this a lot more. This is something I genuinely enjoy, and I have health issues, and I can't really go to the doctor to get them resolved at all, to get them figured out, really. So it's one of those things where if I could ever make this like a full-time thing, I totally would. It would be something I'd do. But I'll give you guys like another minute, then I'll be heading off. I'm going to. Fuck, sorry, I almost called him Sayers. Sirius recommended I use something called Sotero. I've heard about it before. I used it a bit, but I don't think I understood how to use it. Um, so I stopped using it, and now I use Ocular. And I use Ocular just because I like it. I was on Linux for a while because I was on my shitty old computer. I didn't have my computer with me. But yeah, and thank everyone for joining me. Give you guys a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, then I will be heading off. Yeah, while I do some work, I'll probably, if you're in our server, if you'd like to join our server, if you aren't already in, after this, I'll probably be in the general chat. So yeah. Okay. Seems no one has any questions. I kind of don't blame you. I wish there were more questions, but I understand that there isn't. Latour, I feel, oftentimes does kind of speak for himself. It's one of the great things about Latour is that oftentimes he gives a lot of examples. And oftentimes, even if he doesn't give examples of that concept in one of his books, I'm finding out that he actually does give like a lot of examples and other stuff too, that explains it a little bit better. So, um, really happy about that. But I assume no one has any comments. If you do, message me, or sorry, not message me. Message in the politics of nature post in the book discussion thread. Just at me or whatever in there, and I will respond. Or just post in there, and I'm sure someone will also respond too if they have anything they have to add. So, thank you all, and hope you all have a good rest of your day. And I will see whoever wants to join at 4 my time. I will in stream and I'll post the time now. But I'll be hopping in in the general chat. If anyone wants to join me, feel free.